Hundreds of children, some as young as 10, are set to be jabbed with puberty blockers in NHS-backed experiment. Thought we'd learned a lesson with all this crap, but apparently we haven't. Hundreds of children are set to be jabbed with puberty blockers in the first NHS-backed experiment of its kind. The controversial clinical study will see as many as 226 children as young as 10 years old who believe they are transgender take part. They will be injected with the drugs to examine whether they could safely be used in future to help young people change their bodies and become more like the gender they self-identify as, rather than their gender at birth, because we're still entertaining this mental illness. Right? I've said this, there's going to be a huge inquiry in the future, and everybody involved in this is going to be going to jail because this is experimentation on children. This is experimentation on children, and it's being used as an excuse. Basically, the transgender stuff, I don't think they actually give a shit about it. They just think, oh great, this is an excellent excuse to carry out experiments. But we can morally feel okay about it because we're helping them, actually. Like, nah, it's a complete fucking farce. And the heads are going to roll one day, might not be now, maybe 10 years from now, maybe 20 years from now, but like heads are going to roll over this. Researchers dismissed accusations that the trial could amount to coercing children into taking the drugs, which potentially damage fertility, bone density, and brain development, which it does not potential, it's been proven that they in fact do. Puberty blockers do in fact do that. They can be reversed, yeah, greatly at huge cost to your body. Right, and not always, sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes it doesn't bloody work, but they insisted it would be safe because they have planned, and also a 10-year-old cannot consent to that stuff, shut up. They insisted it would be safe because they have planned the most rigorous and safest study design, which will involve close monitoring of any potential side effects and risks. But campaigners branded the study's launch as outrageous, saying it should be halted. Not just halted, it should be scrapped completely. Sources also suggested that some gender-critical groups could launch a judicial review against the trial in a bid to halt it. Because it's experimentation on children. That's why. It's kind of fucked up. Maya Forster, our CEO of sex-based rights charity Sex Matters, said, "It's outrageous that a trial involving yet more children being given puberty blockers has been given the go-ahead before studying outcomes for those already treated. These drugs are a major intervention with no evidence to suggest that they do any good and increasing reason to think that they cause permanent harm. It's both foolish and unethical to expose yet more children to experimental treatment. At this point, the only reason to research puberty blockers is to be able to offer long-term medical support to those who have already been exposed." Stephanie Davies-Arai, founder of Transgender Trend, a parent-led campaign group concerned about the rise in young people wanting to change their gender. By the way, that's plummeting, and it's called the Trans Trenders. Right? See, the amount of people identifying as trans is actually plummeting. Because it was a fad. It was a fad. That's all it was. Right? And some people do have a genuine mental illness about that stuff, and, you know, that's fine, but they deserve treatment. So it's basically, see when you get the guy in the mental hospital that goes, "I'm literally Jesus Christ," which is extremely common. Right? You don't turn around and go, "Yes, my lord." Like you don't entertain it. You tell them that they're not. However, for this specific issue, like, you've got the whole government bending over backwards for it, to accommodate it. And my theory is because if they actually push the fact that, oh yeah, a 10-year-old can absolutely consent to, like, puberty blockers and surgery and frisbeeing their tits off and whacking them across the room and all that type of stuff, like, oh, a 10-year-old can totally consent to that stuff, actually, yeah, what else could they consent to? We are ruled by satanic paedophiles. But anyway, we don't think it's ethical to give irreversible treatment to children where we don't have adequate evidence of benefit, but we do know some of the risks. Those are serious risks to fertility, bone density, and brain development in adulthood. Plans for the trial were announced in 2024 following the publication of the Cass Review, which concluded that the quality of studies claiming puberty blockers have beneficial effects was poor. The Cass Review was damning. That was damning for the entire transgender thing. It recommended a full programme of research should be established to look at the characteristics, interventions, and outcomes of every young person presenting to the NHS gender services. Puberty blockers were since banned from being prescribed by the NHS. Before this, they were given to hundreds of children who were treated at the NHS's controversial Child Transgender, the Gender Identity Development Services, GIDS, at Tavistock and Portman NHS Trust in London. The Cash Review criticised the Tavistock clinic for leaving young people at considerable risk of poor mental health and distress. The youngest patients in the study, sorry, I've got bloody cold, so the youngest patients in the study, being led by researchers at King's College London, will typically be 10 to 11-year-olds for girls and 11 to 12 for boys. The maximum age will be 15 years and 11 months. Horrendous. One group of 113 will be given puberty blockers for 2 years, while the other half will be given the drugs after a 1 year delay. Both groups will be followed up for 2 years, meaning it will be 4 years before any results are published. Convenient that. Children who take part will need permission of their parent or guardian, and it's kind of like getting one of those little dogs in a bag. Like, that's what liberal women love now, man. It's the new trend. No handbag can outcompete a transgender child. That's what's going to get you lots of attention from your peers and people and stuff like that. Yeah. And you're so woke and cool and nice. And look how progressive I am. I literally fucked my child up mentally forever. That's how progressive I am. I'm so happy to serve my child up to Moloch. But anyway, the puberty blockers will be administered by injection. Sorry, I didn't finish that one. According to World Health Organization standards, that they are suffering from gender incongruence. The puberty blockers will be administered by injection and will likely be triptorelin, which has been used and licensed since the 1980s to treat people who need to delay puberty because they start it earlier than normal. I never got offered that shit. That's what happened to me. I had precocious puberty. I had armpit hair and everything at like 7 and shit like that. It was weird. Freaked everyone out. And all that. That's the same shit that happened to me. When I was like fucking 11, I had the little Pedro mustache and all that stuff. Maybe I wasn't. Maybe I didn't have precocious puberty. Maybe I was just Greek. Maybe it was that. Researchers said each participant will have a series of health checks before taking part. Chief Investigator Emily Simonoff, Professor of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry at KCL's Institute of Psychiatry, Psychology and Neuroscience, controversially said some people who take part could remain on the drugs after the study ends, despite them being banned. Because in this case, it's being used specifically for experimentation, and they're banned from being prescribed to the public, but it seems that the loophole that they've got is they're being allowed to be used in like closed tests. And I think what they might be doing as well is, don't worry, it's getting banned. We're just going to create a test, and that way your kids can like totally still have them. Maybe it's that. Maybe they just found like a legal loophole, and that's what this is. Oh, we can't publish it for like 4 years, by the way. Oh, like maybe it's that. Maybe this entire thing's actually a sham. She added, at the end of each trial, each young person will be reviewed individually and clinically to look at their ongoing care needs, which may include remaining on puberty-suppressing hormones if that's deemed clinically appropriate for them. She denied the study amounted to coercion, and in an apparent reference to the Tavistock clinic, added, one might want to argue that puberty suppression should never have been made available to people outside of a clinical trial some 10 or 15 years ago. The most ethical thing to do would have been to do a trial at that time. She insisted that there were high levels of uncertainty about the balance between benefits and harms of taking puberty blockers, and said this justified the study. It will be funded by NHS England and is backed by King's College London and the South London and Maudsley NHS Foundation Trust. Around 5 to 6 children will be recruited every month from the beginning of the new year. A second trial will run alongside it, which will involve around 100 people jabbed with the blockers, comparing them to people who haven't been jabbed for potential brain side effects. The studies have been approved by health regulators. They are part of a wider group of 6 studies, costing the NHS £10.7 million. Now, in regards to this entire thing, right, people who have precocious puberty, where it's like, yeah, they have like an actual like medical affliction where it's like, we kind of need to hold your puberty off a little bit, because going through puberty like really, really early is weird and fucking confusing. Messed me up. Right, but still, that okay, whatever, that's fine. But when it comes to but it's because we want you to maintain your delusion, something that's not true, then that's different. That's not a medical affliction. That's a mental issue. Right, that's a mental issue, and therefore it shouldn't be allowed. And the thing that's going to happen with this is, see, no matter what they come out where they go, oh yeah, it actually does cause infertility. Oh yeah, it actually does cause like hampered brain development. It causes this and that. They're still going to fucking do it. They don't care. They don't care. You think the government's going to listen to you? No, they don't. That's why they're the government, because they don't listen to us. That's why they've been in power for so long, because they don't listen to us, right? This entire thing, I believe, is a sham. I think it's like a little legal loophole way of, yeah, we still totally want to like fuck up these kids, and everyone, right? So they're like, oh yeah, it's for a test, it's for clinical trials. Like that's, I think maybe that's what's happening, and I think the results of the study are going to end up like not even being published. I think that's what's going to happen. But I think the trans trend is starting to wind down now. It feels like it is because the amount of people identifying as trans is like plummeted. It's just absolutely plummeted, and I hope that one day we'll finally see the back of it.